Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. So many times we have a situation in our lives where we say, this is not fair, and we don't know how to fight it. And oftentimes we have people come on the podcast and they're like, you need to get a legal organization involved or get an attorney and go fight. And that seems sometimes daunting and overwhelming and expensive. And I wanted to bring a story to you today about why it's important to make sure you do fight, because right now, I think in this country, we are really fighting for our religious liberties. Oftentimes, especially as Christians, I think we are pushed to the side and our faith is pushed to the side, or our faith is demonized. And I heard this story the other day and I was like, this is a really great story. So I wanted to bring an attorney on here. Her name is Kayla Toney. She is counsel with First Liberty Institute, a nonprofit legal organization where she focuses on religious liberty and the First Amendment rights for clients of all faiths, but also in the education context. So Kayla, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I saw on the news this case of a young woman, and she had explained it a little bit. She had a parking space at school and the kids were allowed to decorate the parking space, and her designs were rejected by the school.
Yes, actually twice. And this was simply because she included a Bible verse reference. So we represent Sabrina Stephens. She's a rising senior at Grand Island High School in upstate New York. And she's very active at her school. She runs the Bible club. And all she wanted to do was put a simple Bible verse on her parking space. The way the program worked is you pay $50 and you can decorate it with any kind of artwork you want, as long as it's not religious. And so her first design had John 14:6 on it, and that was rejected. Her second design had Jeremiah 29:11 on it, and that wasn't good enough either, even though that's everyone's favorite graduation verse. And the only design they would approve was one that didn't have any religious imagery. So that's when she reached out to us at First Liberty.
This is a public school, I'm assuming?
Yes.
And what was their reason you could have anything but religion? Why?
They were worried that someone might be offended. That was really the only rationale we could get from them. It didn't make a lot of sense, and it certainly was not in line with the First Amendment.
It's interesting to me that you can decorate it with anything you want, but they're afraid that it might be offensive if you decorate it with something faith-based, because you would think there could be a lot of offensive decorations. So why would the school not just say you can't decorate parking spaces at all if they were afraid that someone might be offended? It seems like it was pretty targeted to Christianity.
That's right. And certainly, as you said, with high school students, they might come up with something inappropriate or vulgar, and the school could absolutely police that already. But the fact that they would turn away an otherwise, beautiful, upbeat artwork design just because it referenced God or because it included a religious reference, that's just not right.
No, we talk about this a lot, about what's happening in the country when it comes to people, especially with education. It seems like parents are under attack, students are under attack. If you wear a t-shirt, if you have a political reference or a religious reference that the school doesn't like, it's very easy for them to come after you. There's also been cases where the school has done something that parents haven't liked and they don't seem to have a recourse. When you went to the school and first of all, how did you get connected with the student?
Sabrina's mom reached out to us through our website. So at firstliberty.org, there's a page where you can request legal help. And we receive thousands of these every year. And we're obviously not able to help everyone. Not everyone has a clear religious freedom issue who reaches out to us. But Sabrina's mom really did. And so we got in touch with her right away. We did a call with Sabrina and her mom, and we were just very impressed by how committed she was, that she really wanted her parking space to express her faith, because that's the most important thing in her life. That was inspiring to us, and that really made us want to step up and fight. And we also knew that her story could impact a lot of other schools, and it already has. Since her win, we've seen impact in other places as well.
That's what I wanted to get to, is the importance of fighting back when you see something that is wrong like this. And like I said, I think a lot of people are afraid because it's going to be expensive, and what if they don't win? But you said you saw a clear case here. What were the next steps when you talked to the school? Did you have to go into court? Did you have to Or did they just say, you know what, you're right? How did it work?
We sent a demand letter to the school explaining why their actions violated the First Amendment. We talked about how Sabrina's speech has double protection. She's got the free speech clause, which protects her ability to say a message in her artwork. And the Supreme Court has held that artwork counts as speech, certainly when it's coming from a student. And then also her free exercise. It's an important part of her faith to be able to share her faith with others. She does that through her Bible club, and she wants to do that through her parking space. And so those double protections are really the legal hook that Sabrina has. And so after we explained that to the school in our letter, and we also sent a press release, and obviously Sabrina told her story on the local news, which I think made a significant impact as well. The school quickly changed course, and they agreed that not only could she come and paint her parking space after the official deadline had passed, but she could use her original design, which said God is love, and wrote out Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and John 14:6. And so she was able to do that last weekend. She sent us the pictures, and it just came out beautifully. She added a cross. She just was really able to express her faith fully. And that's so exciting.
That is very neat. I think it's interesting that the school was essentially, it sounded like there was some discussion of, well, you can't have anything religious on school property, and there was a confusion with the school teaching the kids like this is a public school, so you can't have religion. Is that true? Was there some pushback on that?
Oh, yes. Initially, what they told Sabrina before we got involved was that it was a school-sponsored activity. So basically, the First Amendment didn't apply, and that's just not correct. Um, this seems like the clearest instance of student speech that I could think of because she paid for the space and she's physically painting it herself and she drew the design. So it's not like you have a teacher up there preaching or forcing conversions or something like that. This is very much in the student speech world. But that is something we've seen. School districts just seem to want to remove religion, remove all references to religion, and then if that doesn't work, they sort of recast everything as school speech instead of student speech, and that's just not right. And we were happy to explain that to them.
I think there is some confusion across the board, and I'm not saying just schools, but I think a lot of Americans believe that the phrase separation of church and state means that you cannot have any public institution reference any religion whatsoever. And that seems to be something that they're kind of pushing down through the next generation and saying there is actually in the Constitution a phrase that says separation of church and state. There's not. And that misinformation is going to our kids. And it's funny to me because the people who are constantly fighting to protect the misinformation and not having any misinformation really seem to not be educated on this one critical piece, this critical item that your religious liberty is there for you and it's meant to be protected.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up because, like you said, separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. What is in the Constitution, right there in our First Amendment, is that free exercise of religion is protected, and so is free speech. And the phrase separation of church and state actually comes from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a group of Baptists who were afraid that they were going to lose their heads because of their faith, because that was something that had happened in the old world where they had immigrated from. And he assured them that there would be a separation, but the purpose of it was to protect the church and to protect especially religious minorities who were afraid of government persecution. And he said that won't happen because the government is not allowed to encroach on your freedom. So that's the backstory to that phrase. But I think you're absolutely right that there is a lot of misinformation going on. And so a lot of what we try to do at First Liberty is we try to educate on these issues. And if we need to educate the educators, we're happy to do that, to explain to school districts that actually the law protects religious speech and religious diversity is a strength of our country. And that's something that the next generation needs to know.
I think also so proud of the mom in this situation because so often as parents, we're going through something, we have something like this come and we take our kid aside and we say, okay, well, what are we learning from this? And we don't fight back because it can be really hard to fight back, especially going on the local news, and especially with all the turmoil we've seen with the situations of parents going to school board meetings. I like this story because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of anger involved, and there isn't, because Sabrina is a religious person and she seems to be very filled with joy. It was, this isn't right. Let's have a discussion. That's not what we hear every day.
That's right. I'm so glad Sabrina was brave enough to stand up. And it's very intimidating, especially as a high school student. Peer pressure is a real influence, but she was not concerned about that. She just wanted to do what was right. And I think the ripple effect of her courage is that other students now are braver and they're more willing to paint their own parking spaces. And we actually heard from some students in Georgia just last week. They had reached out to us about a similar issue when they heard about Sabrina's story, and their school changed their policy. So now they're allowed to go back to their parking spaces and add the religious imagery that they wanted to add, which their school had initially told them they couldn't have. So I thought that was a really special, just a really special impact of, Sabrina's courage up in New York is benefiting some students down in Georgia who now they're able to express their faith too.
That's why when I heard this, I was like, I have to talk about this, because I think we have so many parents and grandparents that listen to this podcast. And it's one thing to educate the kids, but I think even our generation needs to be hearing, you shouldn't just accept that you're being pushed to the side. These are your rights. Your rights are very serious. And it gives parents and grandparents the chance to say, when we have this happen to us, we don't have to get angry. We don't have to jump on social media and immediately yell and scream about what's happening. Go have that conversation, because oftentimes you can change something. And that's something that we've had, even when we've had kids that have been hurt or emotionally hurt by a school, the importance of knowing that there are tools to fight back. And so I want you to talk a little bit about your organization and maybe a few of the other cases that you've been successful in, so parents know there is another opportunity to have another path.
Yes, absolutely. So I work at First Liberty Institute. We are a nonprofit nationwide law firm, and we represent clients of all faiths, which we love to do, but we are a Christian ministry. So our team has that shared understanding, which is also really helpful. And we represent our clients for free. And the only way we're able to do that is that we are supported by really generous donors from all across the US. And so there's more information on our website at firstliberty.org. There's a place where folks can give. And there's also a place where, as I mentioned, you can request legal help. And that's how Sabrina's family got in touch with us. So certainly, if listeners have a family member who's maybe going through a religious freedom issue, please do feel free to reach out to us, because that's how we meet a lot of our clients. And one other thing I'll mention, we just recently put together a very up-to-date toolkit that's designed for students to know their rights in public schools. So I'm happy to share a link with you if that would be helpful to send out to listeners.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of legal precedents that are sort of explained, and we tried to do it in understandable terms, so you don't have to wade through a lot of legalese. But there's a lot of good information in there, and we hope that really equips students and parents to know their rights and to know you are free to speak about your faith. You're free to have a Christian club at school. Your club has to be treated just the same as every other club. Parents are able to view the curriculum that their children are learning. They're able to opt out if that curriculum interferes with their faith. There's really a lot more rights that people have that, again, they don't always know. And a lot of times the school district will tell you an incorrect version of your rights based on this outdated idea that church and state have to be completely separate, when actually there's a lot of space for religious expression, as long as it's voluntary and as long as it's coming from students. There's so much freedom that we have in our public schools today.
I know we had a story a while back of a school that allowed social clubs, and they had multiple social clubs, and they even had a Church of Satan club, but they said that there couldn't be a Christian club because that was religious. And the parents fought back on that. And the school ultimately had to give in and say, okay, actually, I guess that is the correct answer. You can have one of these. Is that the type of case you generally see, or what are some of the other issues that you've experienced?
Yes, we've definitely had some student club cases. Just last year, we represented a fifth grader in Seattle who wanted to start an interfaith prayer club. It wasn't even focused on one faith, it was interfaith. And the school said, no, absolutely not. But of course, they had approved a pride club just a few weeks earlier. And so there again, we threatened to sue. We ended up not having to litigate because the school did agree to allow the prayer club. So that was a great win for that student. And we also work on parental rights. So right now we have a case in California where some fifth graders were forced to teach kindergartners about changing genders. And the fifth graders were not comfortable
Wow.
with this because they were Christians. And so when the parents reached out and asked, to be notified in the future and maybe opt out if their child was going to be exposed to this, the school said absolutely not. And so we are still fighting that case in California. The good news is that the Supreme Court this summer held in a similar case that parents do have the rights to their children of any teaching that interferes with their faith. So that's another thing parents should know, especially going into the school year. You should ask to review the curriculum that your kid will be exposed to, and then you should be able to opt out. And if there's any pushback on that, please do reach out to us at First Liberty because we very much want parents to know their rights and to be able to just to opt out if the material is not something that aligns with their faith.
Did you just say that older kids were being told they had to go talk to younger kids about the fact that they could change their gender?
Yes, it was a buddy mentoring program between fifth graders and kindergartners. And they met every single week and they would do activities together. And it was just a great sort of mentoring relationship. But then the last month of school, the teachers introduced this book called My Shadow is Pink, which is essentially a little boy deciding he wants to become a little girl. And that's what the fifth graders had to teach to the kindergarten. So it was very disturbing.
There's so much that actually happens in school. I had completely forgotten this until the other day. There's so much that happens in your school that you really have to be on top of what's going on and go to every parent-teacher conference and know what's happening, because I think that there's a lot of stuff that naturally happens in the school that they don't necessarily reach out and tell parents about. And maybe because they're not thinking about it. Like my daughter, this was... It's so funny because I had no idea this was happening. And it's not like something that I'm angry about, but this is just an example of when you don't know what's happening at your school. So there was a little boy in her class who was struggling with reading. She was not struggling with reading, but he had to leave class every day, and they would have him and like 5 other kids meet and they would play games. Instead of reading, they didn't have I don't know if there was a reading specialist there, but they would play board games during this time. I don't really understand exactly what was happening, but at the last parent-teacher conference, they were like, oh, your daughter is so sweet. She's the friend that so-and-so picks every day to go to this special classroom with him, and they play these board games, and she's so sweet with him. And I was like, what are you talking about? Then I come home and I'm like, are you missing reading time at school? And she was like, oh, well, I'm the choice because, so-and-so gets to choose somebody every day to go with him and he always wants me to go. And I was like, okay, that's very sweet, but you are missing critical time in class. And I think that's something we don't think about. We as parents have historically trusted the schools, and you put your kids in there, and it's something you really have to talk to your kids about every day. What's happening? How was school? Are you being pulled out of classes? You don't think about it, but it is very critical that and then you have an opportunity to either go to the school, or if it gets to the point where they need to, they can come to you.
That's right. Absolutely. I think that's such great advice for parents. I would say, yeah, never assume that everything going on is in your kid's best interest or aligning with your faith. And I think taking the time to go to the meetings and meet the teachers and get to know and build those relationships and to really be involved is really awesome. And that's where, I love working with parents and students. I think there's so much space for Christians and for people of all faiths in our public schools, but we have to speak up about our rights. We have to know our rights and we have to advocate for them. And at First Liberty, we're, very happy to help folks do that.
Well, I appreciate what you did here. I'm so glad that we got to talk about it because I think it's an important subject for people to know. So give us the website one more time at First Liberty, so in case people need to go check it out and get some help for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. It's just firstliberty.org.
Thank you so much. Kayla Toney, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. For this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com, or you can head over to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch the full video on Rumble or YouTube at Tudor Dixon, and join us next time on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Have a blessed day.